Found the truth. The noise that woke me up wasn't the crash. It was the silence after. Vera didn't come home late that night. She came home quiet. No slamming of car doors. No rustling of shopping bags. Just the soft click of the front door and the unmistakable creak of the floorboard near the stairs, the one I keep meaning to fix. She didn't say anything. Just slipped past the hallway and went straight to the shower. I stayed in bed, eyes open in the dark, listening to the rhythm of the water hitting tile. Something in it sounded rehearsed. She told me the next morning over burnt toast that she'd had a minor accident. Slid a little at the gas station, she said. Barely a scratch. I asked if she was okay. She nodded. Smiled too fast. Bit her lip. I'm fine. Just shook me up a little. I looked out the window. Her car was already parked crooked in the driveway, front end angled toward the curb like it had been left in a rush. The bumper was scuffed, one side of the hood slightly raised like it had been yanked open and slammed shut again. She must have driven it back like that. I'll get it towed this week, she said, sipping her coffee like nothing was wrong. No big deal. But she didn't touch her breakfast. Just stared at her phone, thumb hovering but not scrolling. After she left in my car, claiming hers wasn't safe right now, I stood by the window and watched until her taillights disappeared. Then I turned, grabbed the spare key to her Camry, and went outside. It was cold inside the car. Not just temperature-wise, something about the air felt still, untouched, but disturbed. Like the room you walk into after someone's been crying there. I sat in the driver's seat, heart weirdly steady, and looked around. Everything appeared normal, the air freshener still swinging from the mirror, the usual receipts and parking stubs jammed in the side pocket. Then I opened the glove box and found the receipt. It was from a liquor store 2 towns over. 3 bottles. A brand I didn't recognize. Timestamped 11:17 p.m. That same night. Vera doesn't drink. The smell hit me, then faint, but there. Cologne. Not mine. I leaned over and opened the passenger door, and that's when I saw it. Not the broken glass. Not the scuff on the dashboard. But the lipstick smear right there on the passenger side seatbelt. It was a deep red. Vera never wears red. There were also scratches on the interior handle, like someone had yanked it too hard too many times. The kind of marks you make when you're panicking. Or fighting. I checked under the seat and pulled out a lighter, matte black, engraved initials, TW. Not mine. In the cup holder, a folded napkin with a scribbled phone number. No name. Just a heart drawn in pen. And then came the photo. It was tucked between the driver's seat and center console, bent and water-stained. A selfie. 2 people. Vera and a man I didn't recognize. Smiling. Close. His hand was on her shoulder. Her lips were on his cheek. The timestamp? 2 nights before. My head went hollow. My fingers went cold. I wanted to scream. Instead, I started the engine and watched the dash cam blink to life. And that's when I saw what really happened after the crash. The footage started like nothing special. Just the hum of the engine, the streetlights flickering across the windshield, Vera's voice humming along to some song I didn't recognize, probably one of her playlists. The timestamp confirmed it was the night of the minor accident. Just past 10:40 p.m. I watched her drive. Calm, casual, like someone heading home after dinner. She didn't look rattled or panicked. She wasn't even in a rush. If anything, she looked expectant. Then she pulled into a side lot behind a building I couldn't immediately identify. The camera had a clear view through the windshield, but not much of what was happening outside. That changed when she put the car in park, leaned forward to check her makeup in the mirror, and I swear to God, sprayed perfume on her wrists. She wasn't coming home from a crash. She was getting ready for something. The passenger door opened 90 seconds later. A man climbed in. Tall, dark jacket, buzzed hair, a trim beard. Not anyone I recognized. But he was comfortable. Too comfortable. Like he'd been there before. She laughed when he sat down. A genuine laugh, not the fake one she gives to coworkers, not the strained one she's been giving me lately. This one was effortless. Then, something happened that made my stomach turn. She reached over, took his hand, and kissed it. Not a peck. It lingered. Her eyes closed. They talked for a while, soft voices, but the audio was good enough to catch parts. Did you tell him yet? The man asked. No, not yet. He still thinks we're okay, she said. Do you want me to handle it? No. I will. I just need a little more time. That's when my vision blurred. I had to pause the video and just sit there, staring at the screen like it was going to erase itself if I looked away long enough. I pressed play again. They talked more about logistics, about moving forward, about getting away. There was mention of a cabin, someplace up north. Then she joked about something, said she was worried he'd noticed the bruises this time. He laughed. You mean the one on your hip? She smirked. No, the one you left on my neck. I told him it was from my seatbelt. They both laughed like that was the funniest thing in the world. I stopped the footage and walked to the sink. Threw up. I'm not proud of how I reacted. I punched the wall. Cursed. Slammed my fist on the kitchen table hard enough to make the salt shaker fall. But none of it made sense. None of it added up. Because even if she had been distant lately, this was something else. This was an entire life she had built under my nose. When I calmed down enough to think straight, I went back to the garage and opened the center console. That's when I noticed something else I'd missed. There was a valet ticket, a stub from a downtown hotel. Not a cheap one either. It was dated 3 weeks ago. That same weekend she claimed she was going to visit her sister in Springfield for a wellness retreat. I remember it clearly because I offered to go with her, and she said, "It's women only." That ticket? It wasn't Springfield. It was a boutique hotel 20 minutes from our house. I pulled out my phone, looked up the number from the napkin I found earlier, and texted it. Is this Kip? The 3 dots appeared instantly. Who's this? I didn't respond. I couldn't. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute before turning it off and sitting down in the car, hands on the steering wheel like I was the one who had crashed. Because in a way, I had. This wasn't about an affair anymore. It was about lies so layered I didn't even know what year my marriage had ended. It was like waking up mid-sentence in someone else's story. But what really sent a chill down my spine was what happened later that day when Vera got home and saw me sitting in the driver's seat. She didn't look surprised. She looked ready. And that's when I knew she'd been planning something all along. The garage door was still open when she pulled in. My car rolled up slowly behind me. I was sitting in the driver's seat of her wrecked Camry, the dash cam cable still hanging from the port. My heart was pounding so loud it muffled the sound of her tires crunching on the driveway. I watched her face in the rearview mirror, expecting panic. Or maybe confusion. Or guilt. But Vera didn't flinch. She killed the engine, stepped out, and closed the door with the same eerie calmness I remembered from the morning after the crash. Her heels clicked toward the garage like nothing was out of place. She stopped beside the car, leaned down toward the open window, and looked me dead in the eye. You watched it, she said. Just that. Not a question. A statement. Flat and cold. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a pack of gum, popped a piece in her mouth, and chewed slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. I figured you would, she added. Eventually. I got out of the car, stood in front of her, and asked one word. Why? She actually had the nerve to smile, not wide, but that smug twitch in the corner of her mouth, the kind someone makes when they think they're about to win a game they've been playing in secret. Because I was tired, she said, like that explained everything. Tired of pretending. Tired of waiting for something in you to change. I stood there, stunned. You could have left. You could have said something. Her voice dropped an octave. I did, Lowell. 100 times. But you were always so comfortable. So safe. You wouldn't have noticed if I'd started packing my bags in front of you. Then she pulled something out of her purse, a small white envelope, and handed it to me. Inside was a receipt from a law office. Her signature. A retainer agreement. Dated 4 weeks ago. You were never supposed to find out like this, she said. But you made it hard by looking. Most people don't. They just believe what they're told. I was still trying to process what she meant when I noticed something else in her hand, a key fob. But not for either of our cars. She looked over her shoulder and said, "He's here, by the way." That was when I heard the second engine outside. Not my neighbor's. Not a delivery van. A black SUV pulled up behind mine. Tinted windows. Same model I saw in the dash cam reflection earlier that night. Same driver, Kip, or whoever the hell he was. He didn't get out. Vera turned back to me, her expression unreadable now. I'm not going to argue. I'm not here to beg. I came back for one thing, my laptop. I laughed bitterly. That's it. Well, she said, tapping her chin. And maybe to say goodbye. Properly. She walked past me, entered the house like she still owned the place, and returned 2 minutes later carrying a backpack, her laptop charger dangling from the side pocket. She didn't look at me again. Just walked to the SUV, opened the door, and paused. Oh, she added, looking over her shoulder. Check under the seat if you want more answers. I didn't bother hiding anything after last week. Then she got in and was gone. I stood in the middle of the driveway, stunned by how cleanly she had dismantled our life, like snapping the final piece off a model she'd been disassembling for months. When I went back into the garage and crouched beside the driver's seat, I found a manila envelope taped underneath. Inside? Photographs, printed text messages, a map with circled addresses, notes written in Vera's handwriting, names, dates, license plates. It wasn't just an affair. She was documenting me, watching me, and I had no idea why. But one of those addresses on the map? I recognized it. It was where my older brother used to live before he died 5 years ago. What the hell did she have to do with him? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by printed photographs of me taken from angles I didn't recognize, in places I never noticed anyone watching me. Grocery store parking lots, at the gym, leaving work, once, even walking the dog in the park. The timestamps went back almost a year, all of it cataloged in her handwriting. Sometimes just a date and location, other times a chilling little phrase like, "He's starting to notice," or "Avoid talking about Jeremy." Jeremy, my older brother. He'd been dead for 5 years. A car accident that crushed him between two semis on I-57. It took them 2 days to confirm the body. Vera went to the funeral with me. She held my hand. She cried. Or at least, I thought she did. Now I'm not sure about anything. I pulled the marked map from the envelope again. Her handwriting circled 7 addresses. Most were unremarkable. Shopping centers, gas stations, one that looked like a motel. But then I saw the one that knocked the air out of my lungs, 1991, Larkspur Lane. My brother's last known address. He'd only lived there for 6 months before the accident. We'd helped him move in, me, Vera, and our friend at the time, Davis. I hadn't thought about that place in years. Why would she mark it? I couldn't sit with the question. I grabbed my coat, stuffed the folder in my backpack, and drove through the night. Larkspur Lane was about 40 minutes outside of town, a quiet cul-de-sac in a forgotten neighborhood. The house stood at the end of a gravel drive, half covered in ivy. The porch light was out. The windows dark, but something about it didn't feel abandoned. I parked half a block away and walked the rest. There was a camera mounted above the door, newer than the rest of the house. And when I approached, I saw the faint glow of a monitor inside through the living room window. Someone still lived here. I rang the bell. Waited. My heart thudded in my ears. No answer. But as I turned to leave, I heard the lock click. The door opened a few inches, and a voice I hadn't heard in half a decade rasped from the shadows. Lowell. My blood froze. I looked through the crack in the door and saw something impossible. A face I'd buried. A voice I'd mourned. Older. Paler. But it was him. Jeremy. Alive. I stumbled backward like I'd been hit. He opened the door wider, and now I saw him fully. A little thinner. Bearded. But undeniably my brother. What? How? I couldn't even speak. He pulled me inside before anyone could see, locked the door behind us, and motioned for me to sit down. My knees gave out before I reached the chair. I didn't know how long it would take you, he said quietly. I figured Vera would slip up eventually. I stared at him like he was a ghost. You died, the coroner said. I know what they said, and I let them. His voice was low, full of tension and some pain I couldn't yet read. He stood there, watching me shake, then added, I didn't have a choice. Vera gave me one. What the hell are you talking about? She came to me 2 nights before the crash, he said. Said someone was after me, that I was going to be framed. She said she could help if I disappeared. She made it all sound so logical, so necessary. I just stared, trying to grasp it. You faked your death? Not exactly. She arranged it. Got help from someone. I never met them, but she had all the pieces lined up. The wreck, the body, the ID switch. I didn't even know who she used. Why would she do that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jeremy looked down. That's what I've been trying to figure out for 5 years. I leaned back in the chair, mind spinning. Vera, the car crash, the hotel, the fake receipts, the surveillance folder. And now this, my dead brother standing in front of me, saying my wife orchestrated his disappearance. And I still didn't know the worst of it. Because Jeremy then walked over to a drawer, pulled out a hard drive, and handed it to me. She wanted you watched, he said. Every move, every place, every conversation. For what? She never told me. But it wasn't just curiosity, Lowell. It was obsession. She said you were hiding something. I shook my head. I'm not hiding anything. He nodded solemnly. Then we're both in trouble. And that's when the lights outside the window flared. A black SUV. The same one from the dash cam. Someone was coming for us. And Vera wasn't done yet. Jeremy's eyes darted to the window as the headlights flooded through the living room curtains, cutting long shadows across the floor. He didn't say a word, just snapped off the desk lamp, grabbed my arm, and pulled me down to the ground behind the old plaid couch like we were kids again hiding from our parents. But this wasn't some childhood prank. The tension in his grip was real, ice cold, like a man who'd done this before. I whispered, "Who the hell are they?" He didn't answer, just reached under the couch and pulled out a small black duffel bag that clinked with the unmistakable sound of metal. Inside were burner phones, multiple IDs, and stacks of photos. Not of me, not of him, of Vera. Vera with different men. Vera in places I'd never seen before, some of them overseas. Vera in what looked like a medical lab. Vera with documents, cash, phones. In one of the pictures, she was walking out of a building marked Sycorax Behavioral Group. The logo had a symbol I didn't recognize, but the expression on her face in that photo? That wasn't my wife. That was someone who wasn't afraid of being caught. The SUV door opened outside. Someone stepped out. A man, tall, dark jacket, bald. He paced slowly toward the porch with something in his hand. A phone. He lifted it to his ear, and not 2 seconds later, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I looked at Jeremy. He gave me a hard shake of the head. "Don't answer." The ringing stopped, then started again. A second later, the landline in the house rang too. Old. Corded. Jeremy yanked it out of the wall. Silence returned. Until the man outside spoke, his voice low but unmistakably clear through the crack in the window. "We know you're both in there," he said, like he was reading a script. "This isn't about you, Lowell. This is about what Vera started. You want the truth? You walk out now. Alone." My pulse shot through my ears. Jeremy looked at me, calm but firm. "You walk out there, you'll never know what this really is. And you'll never come back." I whispered, "What does he mean? What Vera started?" Jeremy hesitated. "She wasn't who you thought she was even before she met you. She's part of something bigger. I didn't know when we were together back then, but after the crash, after she disappeared and reappeared under a different name in Michigan, I started digging. She changed her entire identity for 5 years. That lab? That group she worked with? It's not just psychological. They run surveillance, behavior tracking, digital targeting." I blinked, still processing. "Are you saying my wife's a spy?" He half laughed. "No. Worse. She's a handler." "Of what?" "People. Men. Ones who don't realize they're being studied until it's too late. They're manipulated, pushed, provoked, every reaction logged. Every meltdown, every decision, every betrayal. For what? For profiles. To sell. To test. To use." I didn't want to believe it. But I also couldn't unsee the photos. The notes. Her lists. My name written on the cover of one of the files with a code I didn't understand. Subject: EK compliance threshold. The man outside called again. "Last chance. This isn't personal. But she made you part of it. You should have never opened that dash cam, Lowell." I almost stood up. But Jeremy grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway. "Back door," he whispered. "Now." We slipped out into the freezing air, cut between backyards like fugitives. My mind reeled with every step. Jeremy wasn't dead. My marriage was a setup. I'd been watched for over a year, maybe longer. When we finally reached the car I had parked down the road, Jeremy opened the glove box, pulled out a map, and circled a spot 3 hours north. "We'll go here," he said. "We have a friend. Someone who used to work with Vera before she left the program. She'll talk. If she's still alive." I turned to him, still stunned. "What do you mean the program?" Jeremy didn't answer for a few seconds. Then he looked me in the eye and said the last thing I expected to hear. "Vera isn't just part of this. She's the one who created it." The drive that night was the longest of my life. But what we found waiting at that cabin 3 hours later was worse than anything I'd imagined. We didn't stop for gas. We didn't stop for food. We drove 3 straight hours into the northern woods of Michigan, winding through blackened stretches of road where cell signal vanished, and the only sound was the hum of tires over cracked pavement. Jeremy barely spoke. His hands stayed at 10 and 2, his eyes locked on the road ahead like he was afraid it might disappear if he blinked. I wanted to ask him more questions, about Vera, about the program, about how deep this all went, but every time I opened my mouth, the silence felt heavier. Like if I interrupted it, something might shatter. The address he circled was tucked behind a frozen lake. A weathered A-frame cabin with a sagging roof and yellowed curtains pulled tightly shut, The place looked abandoned, like no one had set foot there in years. But Jeremy seemed certain. He parked, shut off the engine, and stared straight ahead for a moment. Her name was Lena, he finally said. Vera's ex-colleague. They used to run field trials together, tracking routines, manipulating behaviors, recording reactions. Lena quit 6 years ago. Vanished. Went off-grid. And you think she's here? I know she was, he said. Whether she still is. We stepped out into the cold. Our shoes crunched on a thin crust of snow as we approached the porch. Jeremy knocked twice, then 3 more times in a specific rhythm, like a secret code. Nothing. He tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, it smelled like burnt coffee and paper. Dust floated in the air like ashes. The furniture was mismatched, thrift store remnants. But the place wasn't abandoned. There was still heat. A kettle on the stove. 2 mugs in the sink. Someone had been here recently. We moved carefully, not saying much, until we reached the back room. A small desk, a corkboard covered in printouts, and a wall of scribbled notes in looping cursive. Photographs. Names. Maps. Symbols I didn't understand. And in the middle of the desk, laid out as if it had been waiting for me, was a sealed envelope with my name written in blue ink. Lowell. Jeremy looked at me, then stepped back. I opened it. Inside was a letter. No greeting. No date. Just 6 handwritten lines. You were never supposed to be the subject. But you were never truly the husband either. She chose you for compliance. The pattern broke when your brother reappeared. That makes you a liability. Do not return home. I stood there frozen. The room felt like it had tilted sideways. I don't understand, I said. What does that mean? I was never the husband. Jeremy looked at the corkboard, scanned the photos, then pointed to one pinned in the corner. It was a surveillance still, me, years younger, sitting on a park bench. Alone. On the back was a label, Target 12D, potential merge. I whispered, merge. Jeremy looked like he didn't want to say it. But he did. They don't build lives from scratch, Lowell. They insert themselves into existing ones. Take over gradually. Erase what doesn't fit. I think Vera was planted in your life with a script. You were tested, groomed, monitored. And the longer it went on, the more variables she had to account for. But the moment you started noticing, the moment you stopped acting like the subject she expected, you became a risk. I sank into the nearest chair. My heart was hammering against my ribs, my breathing shallow. So what now? Before Jeremy could answer, there was a loud knock at the front door. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. We both reached for the nearest drawer, found a flashlight and a folding knife. Jeremy peeked through the curtain. It's not the SUV guy, he said. Then who? He hesitated. It's Lena. He opened the door. The woman on the porch was thinner than the photos. Hollow-cheeked, with dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in months. Her eyes locked on mine, and she didn't say hello. She just whispered, "You found the letter." I nodded slowly. "You don't have much time," she said. "They know where you are. Vera doesn't care who she has to erase to bury this. And you're not the only one she's erased before." She pushed past us into the cabin, dropped a heavy flash drive onto the desk, and said, "Everything's on here. The full program. Subjects. Altered identities. The merges. Including yours." Jeremy and I exchanged a stunned look. You were a control group, Lowell. The only one who was supposed to never know. The lights outside the cabin suddenly flickered. A low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. Lena turned pale. She's here. And that's when I realized. Vera had never been following us. She'd been leading us, right where she wanted. I used to think betrayal was a moment. A specific act. A lie. A single wound you could trace back to where it began. But as I stood in that cabin, surrounded by the proof of everything I didn't know, staring at the woman who used to be my wife in photos that predated our first date by years, I realized betrayal wasn't a moment at all. It was a construction. Layered. Intentional. Built carefully until it looked like trust from the outside. But hollow underneath. The floor shook again. Lena snapped the curtains shut, tossed me the flash drive, and whispered fast, "That drive exposes the entire program. It shows what you were to them, to her. If you can get it to the right hands, it ends this." "Whose hands?" I asked. My voice cracked, chest tight. She locked eyes with me. "Anyone not already in it." There was a loud metallic click outside, like a heavy latch sliding into place. Jeremy ran to the back door. Locked. Then to the front. Same. They're sealing us in. Lena grabbed a binder from under the desk, tore out a page, and stuffed it into my coat pocket. If you get caught, burn that. Don't read it. Not unless you make it out. What's in it? I asked. She just said, proof you weren't born into your own life. That stopped me cold. Before I could speak again, we heard footsteps on the porch. More than one set. Then something even worse, a voice on the old radio scanner in the corner. Clear, emotionless, female. Subject 12D acquired. Secondary assets present. Authorization to initiate phase severance granted. It wasn't Vera's voice, but it was her command. Lena's eyes widened. She handed you over. She doesn't need you anymore. She got what she wanted. I shook my head. What could she possibly want from me? You don't get it, do you? Lena stepped closer, desperate. This wasn't about watching you. This was about what you did when you weren't watched. You were her variable. The one man who still behaved like a human being when everyone else in the program conformed. You resisted. And that's why she's done with you. The electricity went out. The air in the cabin changed, heavier, thicker. A smell of ozone. Not like before. Not like a surveillance op. Jeremy grabbed my shoulder. We need to move now. Through the crawl space. There's a trap door behind the water heater. We rushed toward the back as shadows passed the windows. Heavy boots on the porch. Flashlights scanning walls. Lena stayed behind. I'll stall them. You won't make it, Jeremy said. She smiled. I already haven't. And then she was gone. Jeremy yanked the hatch open. The crawl space was tight, damp, barely lit. We squeezed through it like rats, dragging mud and snow behind us. The sound of the front door busting open echoed behind us, boots stomping, orders shouted. They're not after me, Jeremy said, breathing hard. It's you they want. Why? I asked. He didn't answer. Not until we pushed out into the woods behind the cabin and started running under the moonlight. Then he said, because you weren't supposed to survive the marriage. We ran for over a mile before we stopped near a ridge overlooking the valley. We crouched behind fallen branches, both of us soaked, shaking. I looked at him and said the only thing I could think of. What do you mean not supposed to survive? Jeremy reached into his coat and pulled out a photo. One I hadn't seen before. It was Vera, but not with me. With someone who looked like me. Almost identical. Same build. Same face. But it wasn't me. On the back of the photo, Lowell Kinney, primary terminated April 19th. Merge incomplete. Substitute activated. I stared at the image until my eyes burned. You're not the original, Jeremy said softly. She built your life out of pieces of someone else's. And she made you believe it was yours. And the flash drive? I asked. What does it really have? He looked down. Your origin. The day you were selected. Your emotional profile. The test results. The trigger phrases. I felt sick. She's not trying to stop you from telling the world, he added. She's trying to stop you from remembering who you were before she found you. I sat in the dirt and stared at the stars overhead, trying to remember anything from before Vera. A memory. A smell. A voice. A birthday. Nothing came. Because what I'd always thought was my life might never have belonged to me at all. And the last page Lena gave me, the one in my coat pocket, I was terrified to read it. But I would. By the time the sun crested the ridge and melted the frost off the leaves, we were miles away from the cabin. Jeremy and I had spent the rest of the night moving through backroads, hopping from tree cover to abandoned trails, guided by nothing but the faint glow of his compass app and a quiet urgency neither of us had words for anymore. We didn't speak much. There wasn't anything left to say, not really. The world I'd known had been blown wide open, and all that remained was a single piece of paper folded in my coat pocket, the last page Lena handed me. I had been too afraid to look. But as dawn painted the sky with burnt orange, I sat on a rusted park bench in a forgotten rest stop and pulled it out with shaking hands. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, sharp, rushed, slanted to the left like she'd written it in a hurry, knowing it might be the last thing she'd ever share with anyone. Lowell, you weren't chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were resistant. The program failed with you. You refused to break. You didn't comply. That scared them. They called you a glitch. I called you human. There was more. Vera didn't understand why her methods didn't work on you. Why love, manipulation, isolation, guilt. None of it could override your instinct to search for truth. Even when the truth hurt. You never became what they wanted. And that means you're the only one who still can be free. I didn't cry. Not then. I just folded the page slowly, held it between my hands, and felt something inside me shift. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Pure, Painful, perfect clarity. For the first time in my life, or whatever life they'd built for me, I wasn't walking blindly. I was awake. I turned to Jeremy. We go public. Everything. The files, the drive, the names. All of it. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He just nodded. We spent the next 3 days in hiding. Real hiding, not running. An old safe house deep in the Upper Peninsula. A contact of Jeremy's gave us access to a satellite connection, and from there, we uploaded everything. The flash drive, the surveillance logs, the research files, even the photographs. We sent copies to journalists, whistleblower networks, academic labs, foreign watchdog groups. Anyone who would listen. Anyone brave enough to ask questions. Then we waited, and the world responded. Slowly at first. A few blogs. Then podcasts. Then national outlets. Then international ones. When the first official inquiry launched into the Sycorax behavioral group, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A sense of gravity shifting back into place. Vera vanished, of course. Her house was emptied overnight. All accounts drained. No trace. But I wasn't looking for her anymore. I wasn't trying to undo what she did. I was trying to build what she couldn't, a real life. Weeks later, I moved into a small town on the edge of a lake. I started over under my real name. Not the one they gave me. The one I chose. Lowell Kinney died the day I opened that passenger door. And I don't mourn him. Now I fix up old arcade cabinets for a local rec center. I walk dogs for the neighbors. I plant real flowers in real dirt and fall asleep to the sound of wind and water. And sometimes, when the moon is bright enough, I think about the version of myself she tried to build. And I smile. Because I became something stronger than any program she wrote. I became me. And that, at last, is the ending I choose.